For decades, one name stood above every drum kit in rock history: Neil Peart. He wasn't just the drummer of Rush, he was part of the band's identity. His precision, creativity, and legendary drum solos made him almost impossible to imagine replacing. So when Rush announced their return to the stage after years away, one question immediately dominated the conversation. Who could possibly sit behind Neil Peart's drum kit? The answer shocked many fans: German drummer Anika Nilles. At first, the pressure seemed impossible. Any drummer joining Rush would walk into a storm of expectations. Fans weren't just listening for the beats, they were listening for history. Every fill, every rhythm, every famous Neil Peart moment would be compared. But something happened during the process that changed everything. Geddy Lee and Lifeson weren't looking for someone to become the next Neil Peart. They weren't searching for a copy. They weren't trying to recreate the past. They were looking for someone who understood what Rush really was. The turning point came when Anika entered the room and started playing. According to Lee and Lifeson, their doubts about continuing Rush began to disappear during their sessions with her. What they discovered wasn't a musician trying to imitate Neil. It was a drummer with her own voice, her own feel, and the ability to honor the music without pretending to be someone else. And that was the moment Rush realized something important. Neil Peart could never be replaced, but Rush's music could still live. The biggest mistake people made when they heard Anika Nilles was joining Rush was assuming she had been chosen to fill Neil Peart's shoes. But that was never the mission. Neil's place in Rush history was permanent. His writing, his philosophy, and the way he transformed progressive rock drumming could not be duplicated. After Neil passed away in 2020, Geddy Lee and Lifeson were clear that moving forward without him would be emotionally complicated. Rush wasn't just a band missing a drummer, they were missing a member of their family. So when Anika Nilles appeared, the question wasn't, can she be Neil Peart? The real question was, can she understand Rush? And that answer became clearer the more they played together. Anika was already respected in the drumming world long before Rush. Known for her technical ability, creativity, and unique approach to rhythm, she built her own reputation through performances, teaching, and solo work. She wasn't famous because she sounded like Neil. She was famous because she sounded like Anika. That difference mattered. During rehearsals, Rush discovered that Anika wasn't approaching the songs like a museum piece. She wasn't trying to copy every movement Neil made or recreate every famous drum fill exactly the same way. Instead, she studied the music. She understood the emotion behind it. She respected the structure. And then she brought her own energy into it. For Geddy Lee and Lifeson, that was the sign they needed. They weren't searching for someone to replace a legend. They were searching for a musician who could stand beside that legacy and help carry it forward. The pressure was still enormous, because stepping onto a Rush stage means facing thousands of fans who know every second of every song. And soon, the world would find out whether Anika Nilles could handle the weight of that moment. The first real test wasn't about technique. Anika Nilles already had the skills. Anyone familiar with her work knew she was a powerful and creative drummer. The bigger challenge was emotional. Could she step into a band with one of the most recognizable drumming legacies in music history and make it feel right? Because Rush fans weren't only listening with their ears, they were listening with memories. Every beat of Tom Sawyer, every complex section of The Spirit of Radio, every legendary Neil Peart drum moment carried decades of meaning. But according to Geddy Lee and Lifeson, what stood out about Anika was not that she sounded like Neil. It was that she understood why the music mattered. Neil Peart was known for incredible precision, but his playing was never just about showing skill. His drums told a story. His arrangements created emotion. The best Rush moments came from the connection between the three members: Geddy's bass and voice, Alex's guitar, and Neil's drums working together as one. Anika seemed to understand that. She wasn't walking into Rush trying to prove she could beat like Neil Peart. She was walking in knowing she was joining a conversation that started decades before her. That mindset changed everything. Instead of asking, how do I become Neil? The better question became, how do I help Rush sound like Rush today? And that was exactly what Geddy and Alex were looking for. They didn't need someone to recreate the past. They needed someone who could respect the past while still bringing something alive to the stage. That realization was the moment the impossible idea started to feel possible. Rush wasn't replacing Neil Peart. They were honoring him by continuing the music with someone who understood its spirit. But there was still one major challenge ahead, proving that feeling in front of the fans. When the announcement became public, the reaction was exactly what many expected: excitement, curiosity, and a lot of skepticism. For some fans, seeing anyone behind the Rush drum kit without Neil Peart felt strange. Neil had been there for so long that his absence changed the entire feeling of the band. But Anika Nilles never tried to erase that feeling. That may have been the biggest reason people slowly started accepting her. She showed respect for the history without acting like she was carrying a costume. She wasn't pretending to be Neil. She wasn't trying to recreate his personality, his playing style, or his legendary image. She was simply bringing her own musicianship to songs that meant everything to millions of people. And that approach matched what Geddy Lee and Lifeson had been hoping for. They knew that hiring a drummer who only copied Neil would actually miss the point. Neil was never great because he copied anyone else. He became legendary because he created something completely his own. In many ways, Anika's story reflected that same idea. She had spent years developing her own voice as a drummer before Rush ever called. Her style combined technical control, creativity, and a modern approach to rhythm. She had her own identity, and that was exactly what made her the right person for this new chapter. The emotional moment for Rush was realizing that the band didn't need to chase what they had lost. Neil Peart's legacy was already safe. Every album, every performance, every fan memory had preserved it forever. The goal now was different. The goal was to celebrate what Rush had created and allow the music to breathe again. But even after Geddy and Alex felt confident about the decision, one question remained. Would Rush fans accept a new drummer when the first notes finally rang out on stage? That answer would come when the lights went up and Anika Nilles sat behind the kit. The moment Anika Nilles finally took her place behind the drums, the world was watching for one thing. Was she going to sound like Neil Peart? But that was the wrong question from the beginning. The real moment came when fans began hearing something different. They heard a drummer who respected every note of Rush's history, but who also brought her own personality into the music. That was exactly what Geddy Lee and Lifeson had seen during the process. They didn't choose Anika because she could recreate Neil's every movement. They chose her because she understood the responsibility of playing those songs. A Rush song is more than a collection of difficult drum parts. It's a feeling. It's the chemistry between musicians. It's the emotion behind the performance. And Anika approached the music with that understanding. For many musicians, stepping into Rush would have been overwhelming. The comparisons would be unavoidable. Every mistake would be noticed. Every creative choice would be analyzed. But Anika's confidence came from knowing she didn't have to compete with a legend who was no longer there. She only had to be herself. That was the moment many fans began to understand what Geddy and Alex already knew. The future of Rush was never supposed to be a copy of the past. Neil Peart's impact could never be recreated, and nobody in the band was trying to do that. Instead, Anika represented something different. She represented the continuation of a musical journey that had already inspired generations. The story was no longer about replacing Neil Peart. It became about respecting him. And as Rush prepared to bring these songs back to life, one thing became clear. The best way to honor a true original is not by finding another version of them. It is by finding someone who understands why they were original in the first place. In the end, the biggest misunderstanding about Anika Nilles joining Rush was the idea that she was there to replace Neil Peart. She wasn't. Nobody could. Neil's place in Rush history was created through decades of unforgettable music, powerful storytelling, and a style that changed the way people viewed the drums. He wasn't just a drummer behind the kit. He was one of the voices of the band. And that is exactly why Rush never needed someone to become him. They needed someone who respected what he built. Anika Nilles understood that. She stepped into one of the most challenging positions in rock music, not by pretending to be Neil Peart, but by showing the same quality that made Neil special in the first place: individuality. She brought her own ideas, her own energy, and her own musical identity. That was the moment Geddy Lee and Lifeson realized they had found the right person. Not a replacement, a partner. Someone who could help tell the Rush story in a new chapter while keeping the spirit of the old one alive. And maybe that is the greatest tribute to Neil Peart. Not copying him, not trying to recreate him, but allowing the music he helped create to continue inspiring people. Because legends are not honored when people try to become them. Legends are honored when what they created continues to live. And with Anika Nilles behind the drums, Rush's message remained the same. The music moves forward. The legacy stays forever.